When Trinity Poague entered the courtroom, she did not look like someone accused in one of the most disturbing child abuse cases many people had ever heard. She appeared calm, confident, composed. To many observers, she still looked like the same young woman who had once been crowned Miss Donaldsonville. She was a successful nursing student. She earned strong grades. She received leadership scholarships. She appeared intelligent, ambitious, and destined for a bright future. On the surface, Trinity represented the image of achievement, but prosecutors argued that image concealed a much darker reality. The case would ultimately become a disturbing reminder that public appearances often reveal very little about what happens behind closed doors. Psychologists frequently discuss the concept of social masks, the carefully constructed versions of ourselves that we present to the world. Most people do this to some degree. We hide our frustrations, insecurities, and darker emotions while displaying our best qualities. The danger comes when the mask becomes so convincing that nobody notices what is happening underneath. According to prosecutors, that is exactly what happened here, because behind the crown, the academic success, and the carefully maintained image, investigators believed there was a growing resentment directed toward an innocent 18-month-old child named J.D. At the center of the prosecution's case was a form of jealousy that went far beyond ordinary relationship insecurity. Evidence presented during trial suggested Trinity struggled with one fact she could never change. Her boyfriend already had a child. To most people, J.D. was simply a toddler. To prosecutors, J.D. became the symbol of everything Trinity could never erase. Text messages recovered during the investigation revealed troubling insight into her mindset. One message in particular captured investigators' attention. "I don't want to be the mother of the second child. I want to be the first." Those words would later take on enormous significance because they suggested that J.D. was not merely viewed as a child. He was viewed as a reminder that another woman came before her, a reminder that she would never occupy the unique position she desired in her boyfriend's life. For many people, a partner's past relationships are simply part of reality, but prosecutors argued that Trinity viewed J.D. differently. In her mind, the child represented competition, not for attention, not for affection, but for status, for importance, for being first. As investigators reviewed additional messages, an increasingly disturbing pattern emerged. The language became more hostile, more resentful, more aggressive. What shocked many observers was the contrast between Trinity's public image and her private conversations. Here was a nursing student, a person preparing for a career centered on compassion and care. Yet, prosecutors presented messages in which she complained repeatedly about caring for J.D. She described feeling trapped, stuck, burdened. According to testimony, some messages even contained violent remarks about the child. Jurors were asked to consider an uncomfortable question. Which version of Trinity was real? The accomplished student admired by teachers and classmates, or the person revealed through private conversations? The prosecution argued that the answer became clear on the day everything changed. The timeline was one of the most powerful parts of the case. It was also one of the simplest. At approximately 11:55 a.m., J.D.'s father left the residence. Surveillance footage showed J.D. alive, active, and healthy. The toddler waved goodbye. There appeared to be nothing unusual, nothing alarming, nothing that suggested tragedy was only minutes away. For the next 35 minutes, J.D. remained alone with Trinity. Then, at approximately 12:30 p.m., his father returned. Everything had changed. The child was unresponsive. The happy toddler seen on surveillance footage only minutes earlier was now suffering catastrophic injuries. For prosecutors, the significance of that timeline was impossible to ignore. The child was healthy before being left alone with Trinity. Moments later, he was dying. The defense offered alternative explanations, but prosecutors argued that science would ultimately destroy those theories. Medical experts delivered some of the most devastating testimony in the trial. Doctors described injuries so severe that experienced professionals struggled to explain how anyone could view them as accidental. The injuries included extensive skull fractures, severe brain trauma, a lacerated liver, and patterned bruising on the child's face. One expert testified that the facial injuries were consistent with significant force. Another explained that the skull damage was so extensive that parts of the skull had separated at the sutures. The medical evidence painted a horrifying picture. Perhaps the most important testimony concerned the timing of the injuries. The defense suggested that JD may have suffered an earlier accident and remained active afterward. Medical experts strongly disagreed. Doctors testified that a child sustaining injuries of this magnitude would not simply continue playing, eating, or behaving normally. One physician stated there was effectively zero chance that JD could have appeared healthy and active after receiving such catastrophic trauma. That testimony struck at the heart of the defense theory. Because surveillance footage had already shown JD acting normally shortly before he was left alone with Trinity, if the injuries had already occurred, medical experts said the child could not have behaved that way. The science and the timeline appeared to tell the same story, but prosecutors were not finished. One of the most damaging pieces of evidence came not from the crime scene, not from doctors, not from surveillance footage. It came from Trinity's own phone. Investigators discovered internet searches conducted while JD was suffering from his injuries. The searches included questions such as how to recognize a brain bleed and whether skull fractures could go unnoticed. For prosecutors, these searches revealed something deeply troubling. They did not reflect panic. They reflected awareness. Someone experiencing a genuine accident would be expected to seek emergency medical assistance immediately. Instead, prosecutors argued that the searches demonstrated a conscious effort to understand the consequences of severe injuries. The timing made those searches especially powerful, because while a child was allegedly fighting for his life, Trinity appeared to be researching the very injuries later identified by doctors. The prosecution argued that this was not evidence of confusion. It was evidence of knowledge. As the investigation continued, another problem emerged for the defense. Trinity's explanations kept changing. Investigators testified that her account evolved repeatedly as new evidence surfaced. One version suggested an accident. Another pointed toward a fall from a bed. Later explanations introduced different details. Each time, prosecutors argued, the pattern remained the same. The story changed. The evidence did not. The surveillance footage remained unchanged. The medical findings remained unchanged. The search history remained unchanged. As contradictions accumulated, prosecutors argued that the shifting explanations represented attempts to fit a story around evidence that could not be explained away. Jurors listened as investigators described multiple versions of events. 5 different explanations, 5 different efforts to account for injuries that doctors insisted were not consistent with ordinary accidents. The more evidence emerged, the narrower Trinity's options became. Eventually, the carefully maintained image that had defined her public life began to collapse under the weight of objective evidence. Then came the verdict. For months, attention had focused on whether prosecutors could prove the most serious charge. When jurors announced their decision regarding malice murder, Trinity appeared overwhelmed with emotion. For a brief moment, there seemed to be relief, but that moment did not last, because the jury also returned guilty verdicts on multiple other felony charges connected to JD's death. The courtroom atmosphere shifted immediately. What had seemed like a partial victory became something entirely different. The legal distinction mattered, but the practical outcome remained devastating. As the judge addressed the courtroom, he spoke about the tragedy that had affected everyone involved. A child was gone, a family was shattered, lives had been permanently altered. There were no winners, only loss. Yet perhaps the most heartbreaking image emerged not from the courtroom, but from JD's father. According to testimony and statements presented during the case, he kept one of his son's jackets unwashed after the child's death. The reason was simple: it still carried JD's scent. For grieving parents, Small objects often become priceless connections to the people they have lost. A toy, a photograph, a piece of clothing, something ordinary transformed into something irreplaceable. In the end, that jacket symbolized what this case was truly about. Not pageants, not titles, not courtroom arguments, not internet searches, not legal theories. A little boy who never had the chance to grow up. The story of Trinity Poague serves as a reminder that appearances can be dangerously misleading. Success does not guarantee character. Achievement does not guarantee compassion. And public admiration does not reveal private truth. The Crown may have projected perfection, but the evidence presented in court told a very different story. One in which jealousy became resentment. Resentment became hostility. And hostility, prosecutors argued, ultimately ended in tragedy. For many people, the most lasting lesson is not about the verdict itself. It is about the warning signs, the private anger, the escalating hostility, the belief that another human being is an obstacle rather than a person. Because sometimes, the most dangerous masks are the ones that look the most beautiful. And sometimes, the truth does not emerge until the mask finally breaks.